Burkina Faso declared every inch of its land state-owned and banned foreigners from ever claiming it again. But what shook the world wasn't that decision. It was where this land is going next. No one saw it coming. So, what exactly does Traoré plan to do with all this land? Let's find out. It wasn't a protest. It wasn't a coup. It wasn't even televised. Yet in one stroke of a pen, Burkina Faso did what entire continents have tiptoed around for decades. It reclaimed the ground beneath its own feet. Not with slogans, not with diplomats, but with a law. A hard, irreversible law that redefined ownership itself. The new policy is radical, not because it's aggressive, but because it's honest. It admits what no one in global politics wants to say out loud. That African land, in its current form, has become a currency, a tool for those who don't live on it, work it, or understand it to profit from it. So Traoré's government ended the charade. The reform states, all land, urban or rural, belongs to the Burkina state, not to landlords, not to old colonial families, and certainly not to international developers waiting to build golf resorts on sacred soil. From now on, the government holds the title, and the people hold the power to access it, not through purchase, but through national belonging. This isn't privatization, it's a break from it. In practical terms, foreigners can no longer buy land, not now, not ever. They can apply for leases, of course, 18 years if short-term, 99 if strategic, but the ground itself, untouchable. And here's what makes it even more revolutionary. Burkina citizens aren't just the preferred buyers, they're the only buyers. This isn't just about foreign companies. It's also about confronting the quiet inequality within the nation's borders, where the wealthier elites could hoard thousands of hectares, while peasant farmers beg for a plot the size of a blanket. Now, every citizen has an equal claim, not to ownership, but to opportunity. And opportunity is the point. Because for too long, land reform has meant doing circles, passing papers, hosting conferences, issuing declarations no one enforces. What Burkina Faso has done is remove the middleman. The state becomes the custodian, not the auctioneer. Because when land is treated like a product, it always ends up in the hands of those who have the most money, not the most need. And that's exactly what's happened across the continent. Massive plots, sold to foreign entities for peanuts, while locals are pushed out of their villages for development they never asked for.
The new law repeals the Apartheid-era Expropriation Act of 1975 and sets out how organs of the state may acquire land in public interest for varied reasons.
This law shuts that pipeline down. Cold. Now imagine you're a multinational company eyeing West African territory. You've got money. You've got influence. But you're told, no matter what you offer, you will never own this land. Ever. That's not just inconvenient. It's paradigm-shattering. The business world calls it hostile, but Burkina Faso calls it healing. A return to something more sacred than legal contracts. The bond between people and land that existed long before colonization turned African soil into an international commodity. And if you think this is just about farmland, think again. It's about urban expansion, mining zones, energy corridors, forests, rivers, sacred grounds, everything. Because in the eyes of this new law, land isn't just a resource, it's a trust. And that trust has been broken for far too long. Of course, critics have already sharpened their knives. Some call it reckless, a policy that will scare away investment. Others call it unconstitutional, as if constitutions written under colonial pressure have any moral high ground. But Traoré doesn't flinch, because he knows the real threat isn't that capital will flee, it's that people might finally stay. Stay on their farms, stay in their communities, stay connected to the land without fear that it'll be taken, flipped, or sold out from under them. And once people stay, they build. That's the quiet genius of this reform. It isn't anti-development, it's just anti-predatory development. By taking land off the market, Traoré is forcing a new conversation, one where investment must adapt to local needs, not the other way around. And this isn't just a political gesture, it's a strategic one. With the state holding all land, national planning becomes coherent. Infrastructure doesn't have to weave around private estates. Projects aren't blocked by absentee landlords. The map can be redrawn to serve people, not profits. Still, this is only the beginning, because changing the law is one thing. Changing generations of exploitation, mismanagement, and poverty, that's a different war altogether. The land has been reclaimed, but now it must be reborn, reconnected with those who were pushed off it, redistributed to those who've never touched it, and repurposed for those who've only ever seen it as survival, never as power. The paperwork is signed, the declarations made, the headlines have been written, but land alone does not liberate people, because land without support is just a struggle on a wider surface. So now that Burkina Faso has drawn the line, claimed its soil, and secured its sovereignty, the harder work begins, putting that land in the hands of people who can grow, feed, build, and survive with it. And Traoré's government knows that. This isn't about headlines, it's about harvests. The state isn't just locking land away for symbolic victory. It's opening it up with strategy. Reclaiming land is only phase 1. Redistributing it with purpose, that's phase 2. And this time, it's not the elite who get first dibs, it's the forgotten majority. The first in line? Small farmers. Here's a reminder to please like and share the video and subscribe to our channel to watch more videos on Black culture, history, civilization, and identity. Let's continue now. Burkina Faso's countryside is filled with subsistence farmers, men and women who've worked the land for generations without ever owning it, renting from absentee landlords or multinational firms who treated food as profit margins. Now the state is handing out plots to these families, not as a gift, but as a restoration. And not just plots, but partnerships. Access to state-run agricultural programs, collective water systems, training on irrigation, crop rotation, and climate-resilient farming. Because without the right tools, land is just dirt. The second wave, women's cooperatives. In most African societies, women do the bulk of agricultural labor, yet often own nothing. Traoré's reform flips that imbalance by directly allocating land to women's groups for farming, livestock, and even agro-processing. It's not just empowerment, it's an economic design. When women control land, entire communities stabilize. Food security increases, income diversifies, and education rates rise. That's not theory, that's a fact. Then come the youth. Burkina Faso's population is young, half under 17. For decades, this youth bulge has been treated as a crisis. Too many mouths, too few jobs. But what if it's an asset? The government thinks so. Young people are being offered state-leased farmland, tied to national employment programs, but not just for farming, for agro-entrepreneurship. That means tech-based irrigation, seed development, vertical farming, solar drying, and storage businesses. This is how Burkina Faso turns rural migration into rural innovation. Instead of pouring into cities for dead-end jobs, young people can now return to the land with dignity and profit. But here's the brilliance. Foreign investors are still welcome, on Burkina Faso's terms. Companies that want to grow crops or build factories must now apply for long-term leases through state channels. And their projects must align with national priorities, not export obsession. That means no more grabbing thousands of acres to grow European flowers or avocado exports for foreign markets. The focus is now on food sovereignty, feeding Burkina Faso first. Crops that were once planted for profit are now being replaced with crops for nutrition, stability, and self-reliance. That's a strategic pivot few in the West want to acknowledge, because it means Africa is no longer feeding the world at its own expense. And that reorientation isn't only agricultural, it's industrial. Because the land reform isn't just about who grows what, it's also about where things are processed, packaged, and sold. Under the new economic vision, land allocated for industrial zones will prioritize Burkinabe-owned businesses and regional partners, not foreign monopolies. That means local tomato paste factories instead of Italian imports, local grain mills instead of Chinese supply chains. It's a full-circle plan. Grow locally, process locally, consume locally. And yet, this isn't isolationism. It's economic discipline. The country isn't closing its doors. It's simply deciding who walks through them, when, and why. And perhaps one of the most overlooked victories of this new land system is something deceptively simple: clarity. When land is centrally managed, when records are national, and when ownership is off the market, disputes drop. Legal confusion disappears. Fights over boundaries, title claims, inheritance feuds, all of it begins to fade. That means fewer court cases, fewer evictions, fewer bribes, and more confidence for farmers, builders, entrepreneurs. Because you can't grow food, build homes, or raise cattle on land you fear you might lose tomorrow. Burkina Faso is betting that security over soil leads to security over life. Of course, there are still obstacles. Infrastructure is weak, climate change is real, corruption won't vanish overnight. But for the first time in decades, the fundamentals are being reset. Because in this system, land isn't a luxury or a favor. It's right, a responsibility, a beginning. And now that Burkina Faso has taken these first bold steps, the rest of the continent is watching. From Nairobi to Lagos, from Harare to Algiers, leaders are asking the same quiet question. Could this be the model? Could land finally return to those who live on it, not those who speculate from abroad? And if so, what happens when a movement like this spreads? If you think Burkina Faso is acting alone, you're missing the bigger picture. Because this new land law didn't come from a vacuum. It didn't fall from the sky or spring up overnight. It came from a continent already on edge, already waking up, already rising. And at the center of that awakening? South Africa. In 2024, land reform roared back into South African politics with a fire the world hadn't seen since apartheid collapsed. And this time, it wasn't just internal. It became global warfare. President Ramaphosa's government reignited its push for land expropriation without compensation, challenging century-old property laws and daring to put black land reclamation front and center. White landowners pushed back, Western investors panicked, and then came Donald Trump. In a move that stunned African leaders, Trump threatened to cut U.S. aid to South Africa if it continued seizing white-owned farmland. He called it a land grab, accused South Africa of racism. He even tried dragging Elon Musk into it, turning land reform into a transatlantic battlefield. But South Africa didn't blink. It doubled down, passed new motions, expanded the land court, and launched pilot expropriation projects in 2025 without paying compensation. Was it messy? Yes. Was it perfect? Number. But it was brave, and it lit a fuse. Because elsewhere in Africa, leaders saw something they hadn't seen in decades, a government standing up to the West and refusing to apologize for reclaiming its soil. And Burkina Faso was watching. When Traoré moved to nationalize all land in early 2025, it wasn't just a bold new direction. It was a direct continuation of what South Africa had started. Only this time, there was no parliament deadlock, no constitutional debate, no American ambassador is holding up investment deals. Just a law, one law, and the ground beneath millions of people changed overnight. Burkina Faso isn't doing something different. It's doing something faster. While South Africa fought in the courts, Burkina Faso acted on the streets. While Ramaphosa battled Trump's threats with diplomacy, Traoré answered with policy. And where South Africa hesitated, Burkina Faso accelerated. But this isn't about competition. This is a continental relay, a handoff between giants and underdogs, between seasoned democracies and rising nationalist states. Because both countries, despite their differences, are now fighting the same war, the war to make the African land African again. And now, it's no longer a South African debate. It's becoming an African doctrine. From Namibia to Kenya, conversations are changing. Young leaders are citing Burkina Faso in student forums. Activists are referencing South Africa's defiance in court petitions. Landless farmers are asking a new question. If they can do it, why not us? Of course, the fight looks different in each country. South Africa is dealing with historic wealth, strong institutions, and international pressure. Burkina Faso is recovering from years of instability, economic isolation, and military transition. But the ideology is now shared. That land is not a commodity. That ownership must serve sovereignty. That foreign pressure is not a reason to stop. It's a reason to move faster. And that's why this moment matters. Because what South Africa faced in 2024, global condemnation, investor panic, Trump's threats, Burkina Faso now faces in 2025. Different language, same tone, different president, same empire. And yet the resistance is growing. What began as one country's internal policy is becoming a continental strategy. And if it spreads, The foundations of Africa's post-colonial economy could collapse and rebuild all at once. So, no, Burkina Faso didn't invent this revolution, but it refined it, accelerated it, localized it. And now that the baton has been passed and the fire is spreading, the question is no longer if land reform will define Africa's future, but how far will it go? Will the continent stand together, or be picked off one by threats, sanctions, and silence? The moment a nation in Africa takes back control of its land, the air shifts. You can almost hear it. The discomfort in the boardrooms of London, the panic in Brussels, the threats whispered through diplomatic cables from Washington to Nairobi. It's a pattern as old as the flag on the embassy wall. Every time Africans assert ownership over their soil, someone in the West claims it's a threat to stability. But here's what's changed. No one's listening anymore. Burkina Faso didn't pass its land reform law to win applause. It didn't nationalize its soil because it wanted to provoke sanctions. It did it because the old model was broken beyond repair. For decades, African countries were taught to play the game. Stay open to foreign investment, follow IMF advice, sell your raw materials, lease your land to overseas partners, and, in return, get trickles of aid and pats on the head. But all that did was turn African land into a global commodity, one traded between corporations while the very people who live on it were pushed to the margins. When Ibrahim Traoré signed the land decree into law, he wasn't just changing legal language, he was breaking that pattern once and for all. Of course, the reaction was swift. Western media called it reckless. Think tanks called it dangerous. Some whispered that Burkina Faso would soon face economic isolation. Development contracts were paused. Embassy officials began hinting at future consequences. But Traoré didn't back down, because he's not alone. He's not the first African leader to be threatened for refusing to sell out his people, and he won't be the last. South Africa found itself in a similar storm. After reviving its campaign to expropriate land without compensation, a move meant to finally undo the apartheid legacy that left millions of black South Africans landless, the backlash was immediate and fierce. Now, Burkina Faso is carrying that same fire, but with fewer resources and more urgency. What the West fears most isn't that one country reclaims its land. What it fears is that others will follow. Mali and Niger have already joined Burkina Faso in pushing for collective economic independence, building a confederal bank to escape French monetary control. Zimbabwe, long punished for its land reclamation policy, is now being studied again, not as a cautionary tale, but as an early warning of where the battle would eventually go. Across the continent, more leaders are realizing that sanctions are not the end of the road. They're just another chapter in the price of sovereignty. Sanctions are used to crush African economies. Today, they expose Western fear. When Burkina Faso was cut off from aid, it began funding domestic rice production and reindustrializing its supply chains. When the West froze diplomatic ties, the country strengthened its regional bonds. And when corporations threatened to leave, the government smiled, because the land would remain. And now it finally belongs in Burkinabe hands. Make no mistake, the road ahead will be hard. Foreign influence doesn't disappear quietly. There will be pressure, covert campaigns, and economic sabotage disguised as market reactions. But African leaders are learning to spot these tactics. And the people are watching. They remember what it looked like when their governments bowed to foreign demands. They remember what it felt like when their land was sold off for mining contracts and sugar plantations, while villages were displaced without warning. This time, they're not just observers, they are the movement. The West can apply sanctions, suspend trade, and withdraw envoys. But this generation of African leadership has calculated the risk. The real danger isn't being isolated from Europe. The real danger is being estranged from your people. And the leaders who understand that, from Ouagadougou to Pretoria, are building something stronger than alliances. They're building legitimacy. Africa's era of quiet compliance is over. The message is clear. You can sanction us, demonize us, destabilize us, but you can no longer stop us. The time for hesitation is gone. The continent is rising not with rage, but with resolve. Do you think they can scare Traoré? Will African nations be stopped? Let us know in the comments section what will happen if more African nations join Burkina Faso. Do you want to watch more videos like this one? If so, subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon next to it. We have decided to bring videos on something nobody talks about: the Black culture, civilization, history, and evidence about how glorious Blacks have been. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, stay tuned.